Hi there, welcome to Floating in Books. Today I have a book wrap-up for you. I read 3 physical copies in the past few weeks and I listened to 2 audiobooks, so I want to tell you all about the books that I've been reading lately. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. This is a quick little video that I just want to film to have something to go up. I'm makeupless. I am doing spring break at the minute. I'm really into like reorganizing my home, like spring cleaning, doing all that. So I'm sort of taking a break in the midst of all that to sit down and film this video for you. So yeah, that's why I was like, you know what? My makeup room slash office slash walk-in closet space is a mess because I decluttered my makeup collection the other day and I haven't had time to film my reorganization of my makeup collection. I always like to do that on my other channel once I've decluttered everything and like give everything a nice refresh. And it is my plan to sort of like really do a deep clean of my bedrooms as well this week. So I haven't done that yet. So that's why I'm like, you know what? I have no way to be putting makeup on my face today because everything is everywhere now. Like I might as well just film a video. I have very little battery life on my camera left as well. So I'm just gonna race through these books and tell you all about it. So first things first, I want to tell you about the 2 audiobooks that I read. This is everything I've read so far in 2024. I'm sort of on schedule for the Goodreads goal of 50 books to read, which is great. And I have been enjoying reading a lot more. I'm not fully successful yet, but I have this aim of reading at least 50 pages a day, every single day for a year, because I figured that way I can very easily finish about a 300 to 350 page book every single week. And that should leave me with enough space to get to the 50 books I want to read this year. However, it's like whenever I read audiobooks, I never know how many pages that is. So I sort of just eyeball it, you could say. So the first audiobook I read is in Dutch. Both of them are actually in Dutch. And this was a nonfiction by a Dutch celebrity, like well-known person. She is a comedian who did stand-up and she's known from television. Her name is Saga Kroos, and she wrote a book about her experience with Dutch mental health care and abuse that she experienced when she was a child that led to her becoming like severely depressed and needing to be admitted. And then while she was in that hospital, one of her therapists actually abused her as well. So it's a crazy story, not something for the it's not like a lighthearted story. It is a very serious, very depressing story to listen to, but I think an interesting and important one to listen to as well, because it's so like bleak and also because there isn't like a nice resolution at the end. I ended up giving this 3 stars because it does take effort to go through it, just because of the material that is being discussed being so harrowing and so incredibly depressing that just by listening to this, you kind of like feel her pain. So it's not a pleasant read at all, but it's definitely one where I'm like, yeah, this is important for people to know about, like how these things work and also the powers that be. Like once she starts to get into the process of trying to prosecute the people who are responsible for the abuse that she experienced from her therapist, she just enters this this wasp's nests of officials and like the government just working against her, which is actually quite it's not a nice one, not a pleasant one, but it was a 3-star read because it is like an important topic to talk about, I think. So that's why I did give it 3 stars. And the other audiobook I listened to is another Dutch book. It's by a Dutch neuroscientist called Sommer, and her book is about the female brain. That's what it's called, Het Vrouwenbrein. And this is all about the differences that are lying in your brain, in your frontal cortex and other parts of the brain that make things inherently female or male. But this book, for how short it is, also taps into so many other like biological differences between men and women. And it kind of feels like it's trying to do too much in one go. So that's why I only gave this 2 stars in the end. It's another nonfiction. I tend to listen to nonfiction more so than I do fiction because I find it easier to follow. easier for me to listen to. If I listen to fiction, I feel I miss a lot of parts of the story, so that's why I tend to not do fiction very often as an audiobook. But this was, like, it was interesting for sure, but it wasn't like I'm like, oh, I want to read more by this author or anything like that. Again, important topic for sure, but I just felt it was, I mean, it's clearly like, you know, popularized science sort of information, so it's trying to be a little too cookie cutter, I feel, and it's just not really that interesting, I feel. So that brings me to the 3 physical copies I read. And I read a sci-fi, I read a murder mystery, and I read a fantasy book. So a little bit here for everyone, I hope. The first book of the year was this guy. This is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I believe this is part of a series, but I'm not entirely sure because it doesn't say like number 1 anywhere. But I do feel there are books in the same universe or with the same characters anyways. And this was recommended to me by the lady at the bookstore saying, oh, it's my favorite book. I've reread it 3 times. And I was hoping this to be like a sci-fi. I'm trying to dip my toes into sci-fi. But this didn't feel like a sci-fi to me. I mean, surely it's like about like interspatial travel and it's got those elements to it, but it felt like a rom-com, but set in space. That's literally how this reads to me. So it's much more about all of the relationships between the people on the spaceship that we enter at the start of this book. But there wasn't a lot of space going on. There wasn't a lot of science in the fiction, you could say. And that I found a little bit disappointing because very early on in the story, we learn that the crew on the spaceship that we have joined in this story is set to do a nearly impossible task. And the amount of pages that task gets in this story, that everything builds up towards, is literally 2 pages. And I was like, is that it? Like, I didn't get any of the tension. It's just a lot of people in a cramped space talking to each other. If you like that sort of thing, if you're more of a character-driven plot person, you may really enjoy this, but I felt none of the characters really jumped out at me, and it felt very tropey because of it. Because you have, like, the quirky tech, and you have this person, and that, like, everybody has their role, and it's, like, very boxed in, and nobody veers away from it. And then, of course, there's the cranky nerd who then has this crisis and then has to work together with his worst enemy. Like, it just felt so predictable in who would end up with who and how things are gonna go. So at the end of the day, I didn't like this as much as some people, and I didn't like it enough for a reread. This was okay. It was enjoyable for sure. It was entertaining, which is why I gave it 3 stars. And I know that I'm very conservative with how many stars I give to books, but 5 stars to me is like life-changing, yay, I would recommend this to everyone, which is very rarely. A good, great book for me is 4 stars, and something that was okay, I tend to give 3 stars. There was nothing wrong with this. I enjoyed reading this for sure, but it took way too long to get to where it wanted to go plot-wise. And once we got there, it was over in a split second, and none of the repercussions, like for a book that's based around relationships between characters, none of the repercussions of the act of that one event like impacted any of the characters in the story. So about 3/3 of this story is just people talking to each other. We get one event and then they're back to talking to each other like nothing ever happened. I don't know why. The stakes just weren't very high. Maybe this is like a cozy sci-fi. Maybe that's how people want to categorize it. But if I had known that going into it, I didn't necessarily need it. It was just a bit too bland for me. And then something I did give 4 stars to is the 4th book in the Thursday Murder Club series. This is by Richard Osman, The Last Devil to Die. This was a book series that I said after reading the first one I wasn't going to read the rest, but then my friends bought me books 2 and 3 in the series for my birthday one year, and so I ended up reading the rest, and now of course I'm invested in these characters and I want to read the rest of the series for sure. I do feel that this isn't the best one. It's fun, but it's also sort of getting a little bit old, and it also says in the back that the author is going to take a break from this series for a bit because he's got a new one in the works. And I think that that's the way to move things forward, because I feel these characters, like, the same things keep coming back that are also happening in book 2 and 3, and it's sort of becoming its own little circle, and I found that already a little bit problematic in the first one. So I feel that now that we know these characters a little bit better, what's going to be the next step for them? And that's, if the author can do that, then I'm going to be invested in this series again. But this one, especially for how thick it is, it could have been edited better, I think. That's why it's not a 5-star read. Was it enjoyable? Yes. In case you don't know what the Thursday Murder Club series is about, it's about a group of pensioners who live on in a retirement community together, and the first book starts with them reviewing cold cases, and they get sucked into real life cases, and that's of course what we get moving forward, where people keep dying somehow around them, and they end up helping the police all the time, solving the mysteries, which is starting to become more and more unbelievable as the books go on as well. By now the cops are their friends, and they are dating their, it's a whole thing, it's dating lives, and people meeting other people. There are quite a lot of subplots coming into this as well that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the main story, and it's just there to be there to give depth to the characters, which I feel doesn't always work either. So that's why this one is enjoyable. If you like your British humor, banter between characters kind of thing, then this can be nice. But I did feel that this was long-winded, and it got off the point so many times to the point where I got frustrated with it. So yeah, it was enjoyable. It was definitely a 4-star read. I do enjoy the series. But I think, it's not worth it to stick with 4 books necessarily for this series by itself if you haven't read it yet. And finally, a book I finished just this morning is Jade War, the second book in the Greenbone Saga series from Fonda Lee. I absolutely adored book 1 of this. It's Jade, where is it? Jade City. And this is set in a fantasy world where we have people who can wear jade to activate special powers. And in the first book, it's very much contained around one family and their role as a clan who can wear the jade, and who therefore within the city they live in have certain powers and privileges. And there's another clan who they clash with all the time. And in this book, the world expands. The world is no longer contained to this one city. We have one of the main characters from the first book moving to another country, quite literally. And we also have the other main characters traveling to other countries as well. So the world is expanded, and the world is becoming a lot more filled with political intrigue, a lot of scheming. And that was something I really, really enjoyed about the first book. But where the first book, even though it was very meandering and very sort of, how should I say it? There was always something that kept me reading, but it was a very slow burning read. But there were a couple of really high action-packed moments in the book that really, plot twist, threw the plot around, that made me want to read even more. And with this one, I felt there was less of that, even though the book is bigger. So it was very meandering, and I loved all the scheming and the political intrigue in this for sure. We get to know our characters a lot better, but I also feel that this is the book that sets up all of the action that's going to happen in the final book. That's how I feel now that I've read this one. I kind of feel it's like that in-between book where things need to happen to move characters along in the story, but nothing too major can happen to them, like in the first book, what we had going on there. I'm pretty sure that in the third book, the clan war that we've been reading about for the past 2 books is going to come to a boiling point, because you can tell with how this is written, there is this clan war still simmering at the surface for these characters. And that's what we're working up against, or up towards, you could say. Sure, some stakes are raised in this as well. I mean, we have a couple of characters who are less important in the first book, but who become main characters in this second book. that we have things happening to. So I think that that's an interesting development, to see some more perspectives in this story. But I also feel that those multiple perspectives and the fact that this is such a like slow burner reading kind of experience, it does take the pacing out of the book. And what I found with this, there is a lot of text on the page. So where a normal book, I can easily read 50 pages in an hour, like compared to something like this where there's barely anything on the pages, like you're gonna fly through this. But this is small print, there's a lot of text on the page, and it is over like close to 600 pages. So this took me a couple of weeks to read. Also because it's such a slow pace that the story moves at, you can really read it like chapter for chapter and sort of like feed yourself little bits of the story. But it is also a story, because it is about the scheming and the political intrigue in this world, where you do need to pay attention to who is who and how people are related, because the minute you miss that, you're not going to get the same fulfillment and enjoyment out of reading this book. This wasn't as great for me as the first one. Like the first one was a 5-star read for me. This was still 4. I still really immensely liked it, but I put this away over the weekend, having roughly 100 pages left in the book, thinking in these next 100 pages so much is going to happen. I need to be mentally ready for this. And then I felt that didn't quite happen. So on that perspective, like from that perspective, this book disappointed me just a little bit. But now that I've finished reading this, I am super excited for starting the third book. However, if you know anything about my reading, I like to sort of alternate between reading something more fantasy related and then reading something else. Like if I read too much fantasy, I can just struggle getting my head into the world that we're in if I keep switching back and forwards between all of these different worlds. So I like doing something fantasy related and then doing something that's set more in the real world and then going back to something fantasy related. So yeah, I will definitely be reading the third book in this series very, very soon. But I think for now, I think the one I have selected is Holly Jackson's A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, because I'm feeling murder mystery and I'm feeling something fast-paced after this. And I think I want to start a new series before I finish this one as well. So maybe 2, 3, 4 books down the line, I might pick this up again. Because this is so good, I also want to savor it. You know what I mean? I'm not sure if anybody's ever done that, where they've read books where you've just really, really enjoyed the books, but you don't want to fly through them too quickly. You just want to pace yourself so that you have that enjoyable first time reading experience that a book can give you. And this series is absolutely perfect for that. So again, if you like political intrigue set in this fantasy world that feels very different from the world we live in, but that at the same time has a lot of recognizable elements. I feel the main city where most of the story is set feels very much like a really gigantic, like those really big Asian cities in the Asian continent. I've never been to an Asian country, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like something like, you know, a Hong Kong or a Beijing, like something with high rise and but secluded. It's like located on some sort of island. So I was also thinking maybe something like Singapore could like be a substitute for something for the city that we have in here, and then where people travel to feels very New York to me. So we have all of these different factions, and it feels like a very different world. But if you've been to places or if you've seen places online, you can sort of almost get the atmosphere, and that's what I love about this, without being too descriptive, because we don't get a lot of descriptions of what things look like at all. I mean, the amount of work that has gone into these books, from all the ways all the characters are named to brands that people consume. Like we get quite a lot of references to cars, and it's very and also like establishments and like restaurants and places that people go, and it just comes alive. And I feel that that's just a great way of telling how good a book is if an author can do that. So definitely highly recommend this one, but I do feel it's sort of like an in-between kind of book, which is why I gave it 4 stars instead of 5. And on that note, I need to quickly finish this video because my battery is at 1%, so I need to start finishing this video here. This is my second channel. I have a main one where I talk about makeup 4 times a week. You can't tell from my makeupless face, I'm sure. But I do one video a week over on this channel, which is more books, lifestyle, and fashion related. And I have a blog where I review lots of makeup products. So I would like to stay tuned for more content if that's what you're looking for. I will be back on this channel next week with a new video, and then you'll see what I got up to during my spring break, because I'm filming little bits and pieces to put together a vlog for this channel that should go live in about a week's time. So thank you so very much for being here today, and I hope to see you in my next video. See you next week. Bye-bye.